Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, was arrested yesterday. Forensic tents were erected and detectives were seen in the garden with shovels, drawing comparisons with Fred West, which is unfair because Fred West could at least be trusted to complete construction projects on time and to a budget. If the SNP tried to lay a patio, it would take 8 years, £150 million, and would just end up being some grass that had been painted to look like a patio, like these painted on windows on ferries that Sturgeon pretended to launch. The arrest led people to speculate as to what the police could be digging for. The corpse of the Scottish independence movement? Someone who supports Sturgeon's self-ID gender laws? Could stolen SNP money actually be buried in a shortbread tin in the garden? There's been a murder. It's the SNP's credibility. What's going on? For years, Sturgeon and her husband had an iron grip over the SNP and over Scotland. She was leader and he was the chief executive. 6 years ago, Sturgeon promised a second referendum on Scottish independence after losing the first one, after enough Scottish people sobered up in time to realise that it's a terrible idea. You might be thinking, wait a minute, wasn't the first referendum described by the SNP as a once-in-a-lifetime vote? 6 years isn't a lifetime, we're not gerbils. Sadly, life expectancy has come down so far in Scotland under the SNP that 6 years is about as long as you can expect to live. To support the second referendum, Peter Murrell launched a fundraiser and raised about £600,000 from Scottish people who really don't like England. But the second referendum never happened, so where did all those donations go? There were allegations that it had been misappropriated. Some donors demanded their money back. Police Scotland launched an investigation and are now looking at 5 transactions made while Peter Murrell was still chief executive of the party, including at least one that involved the purchase of a car. In fairness to Peter, that car allowed him to drive to the bingo and achieve independence from his wife, Nicola Sturgeon. The donors should have specified exactly what kind of independence they wanted. I think that's legitimate. The arrest comes just as the SNP collapses in on itself. Sturgeon suddenly resigned a fortnight ago after a fiasco around her gender reform bill that saw male prisoners housed in women's prisons. Although in hindsight, perhaps Sturgeon only brought the gender reform bill through to make sure that she herself could be sent to a women's prison. I did a video about the Scottish gender woo-woo cult, by the way, if you want to watch it. You can see it on my Patreon. Sturgeon's husband then resigned after it was revealed that the SNP had lost 30,000 members. Man, SNP supporters are like Manchester United fans. They're only supporters when they think they're winning. But Sturgeon and her husband must have thought that they were untouchable. They spent their time in power bringing the criminal justice system, government and media under their control. All 8 Scottish police forces were centralised into one force, Police Scotland. It's easier to influence one organisation instead of 8. The head of the Scots State Prosecution Service, the Lord Advocate, is appointed by the SNP and acts as the SNP's chief legal advisor. So if there's a criminal prosecution against the government, it's both prosecuted and defended by the same person? A mafia boss couldn't dream of a more preferable system. The Scottish Government's media ad spend keeps the mainstream media in the pockets of the SNP. If journalists criticise the SNP, there's the implicit threat of lucrative government adverts being pulled. Even as police were in Sturgeon's garden with shovels looking for missing donations, some journalists were running stories asking for donations to the SNP. It just shows how journalists are totally in hot to the SNP. And more donations? Aren't the SNP running out of biscuit tins to bury the cash in? The SNP even own the comedy clubs in Scotland, so comedians can't risk criticising the SNP or they'll be blacklisted, like I was. Hasn't really shut me up though, has it? This corruption investigation is just the tip of the iceberg. SNP Minister Natalie McGarry was jailed for embezzling £25,000 from pro-independence groups. There was an £8.3 million fraud probe into SNP-controlled Dundee City Council, but these are small potatoes compared to the fraud alleged in a BBC documentary about a £97 million contract for ferries awarded to Jim McCall, a close pal of the SNP's, which has since ballooned into £150 million of taxpayers' money and rising, and still no ferries. There are rumours of businesses receiving government grants then donating to the SNP, either directly or through staff and directors. The SNP shower themselves and their buddies with taxpayers' money, even when they don't need it. Brewdog is a shining success story in Scottish business, even though its overpriced, overcrafted lagers taste like washing up liquid and flowers. But despite their profits, Brewdog received over £1 million in government grants. Why do they need this money? They're not struggling. Is it a coincidence that Brewdog support the SNP, donate to them, and help with their political campaigning, even hosting a photo opportunity for Nicola Sturgeon on the campaign trail? The stand comedy clubs were one of only 3 arts groups and venues in Scotland out of 203 applicants to receive the maximum COVID relief grant of £250,000. The stand comedy clubs are owned by SNP politician Tommy Sheppard, and that's just the money that's been handed out. An audit showed that the SNP left £2.5 billion in emergency COVID business relief unspent, much of it unaccounted for. This money was given to the SNP to give to struggling Scottish businesses. Why wasn't it handed out when they needed it? And more importantly, where did that money go? As we've seen in the Kremlin, the culture of kleptocracy starts at the top. Devolution has been a disaster for Scotland. Holyrood isn't subject to the same scrutiny as a proper parliament like Westminster, so it's allowed a mafia to seize control of Scotland by banging a populist anti-British drum that appeals to the darkest xenophobia in the hearts of Scots who've seen Braveheart a few too many times. Scotland is a banana republic, but you can't even get a suntan, and nobody eats any bananas. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe and share this video with a Scottish nationalist friend to piss them off, and consider becoming a patron to support me making these videos from as little as £3 a month. There's a link below and you get exclusive patron only content and live streams and things like that. It's great, I promise. Anyway, thanks for listening. I've been Luke here. Bye. Bye bye.